Imagine walking through the streets of an American metropolis on a sunny Tuesday morning, be it Los Angeles, Seattle, or Phoenix. The sun glints off the glass facades of tech giants, and people hurry to their office jobs clutching their biodegradable coffee cups. But a glance downward reveals a reality we've been collectively trying to ignore for years. Between the gleaming facades and designer stores, tents line the sidewalks, and the smell of asphalt mingles with the bitter scent of poverty. The number of people living on the streets in the United States has surpassed the 750,000 mark. This is a historic high, showing that the American dream has finally burst for an alarmingly large number of citizens. We no longer see just the cliched image of the lonely man with a bottle of wine. There are women who have fled abusive relationships, young adults who have been kicked out of the foster care system, and, increasingly, entire families who have to spend the night in their old SUVs in supermarket parking lots. As we walk by, each of us has probably asked ourselves that one, almost agonizing question at least once, whether or not we should give money to the homeless person on the corner. Often, what remains in the end is less a clear answer than a sense of helplessness. It's a moral dilemma that strikes a chord deep within us. Do we give something to ease our own conscience, or are we funding the next fix of a synthetic drug that will only make the problem worse? In the United States, however, the situation is far more complex than in Europe. Here, there is no stable social safety net to catch everyone who stumbles. The principle of personal responsibility is deeply rooted in the American DNA, yet in the current economic climate, this principle often leads straight into the abyss. Anyone who loses their job in the US often loses their health insurance within a few weeks and their home shortly thereafter. A single medical emergency can drive a family into ruin, as treatment costs remain astronomically high despite all attempts at reform. In theory, programs like housing vouchers or food stamps do exist, but the bureaucratic hurdles to accessing them are so overwhelming that many of those affected simply give up. To receive government assistance, one often needs a permanent registered address, a working cell phone, and a bank account. Every additional request becomes yet another hurdle in an already unstable daily life. However, once someone has ended up on the streets, they lose these prerequisites at breakneck speed. A vicious cycle emerges from which there is hardly any escape without massive outside help. One might cynically think that these people are to blame themselves if they cannot overcome the bureaucratic hurdles. Perhaps you see the beggar at the subway station and think that someone who cannot even fill out a form does not deserve the hard-earned money of taxpayers. But this perspective is dangerously superficial and ignores the psychological consequences of homelessness. Many people find themselves in a state of shock. In this state, organizing a trip to the government office is as unattainable for many as a journey to the moon. Added to this is the severe housing shortage, which will have a tighter grip on the US than ever before. What is a business opportunity for investors becomes an existential crisis for others. In sought-after coastal cities, rents have risen so high that even people with 2 or 3 minimum wage jobs can no longer afford a one-bedroom apartment. When a landlord raises the rent by $500, it means the immediate loss of their home for tens of thousands of people. Often they first try to find a place on a friend's couch, but once that option is exhausted, the only choice left is the street. Once there, it is nearly impossible to find their way back to a stable life. The psychological strain caused by constant uncertainty, sleep deprivation, and social exclusion leads many to depression or addiction. Alcohol and drugs are then often used not as a cause, but as a desperate form of self-medication to block out the unbearable reality for a few hours. When crime and a hostile environment are added to the mix, the downward spiral is complete. Homeless people with serious health conditions will cost the American system billions. A single trip to the hospital, including emergency room treatment, can easily cost $2,000, and many homeless people are admitted several times a month due to their poor health. A 2025 study showed that combating homelessness through prevention and permanent housing would be about 7 times cheaper than simply leaving people on the streets and providing medical care only in absolute emergencies. Nevertheless, many U.S. states struggle to implement long-term solutions like the housing-first approach on a widespread basis. Long-term strategies often fail not because of a lack of knowledge, but because of a lack of political will. Instead, they cling to short-term evictions of tent encampments, which merely shift the problem from one neighborhood to the next without addressing the structural causes. This gives the impression that the problem is being managed but not solved. A deep sense of shame arises, further fueled by the contempt and disgust of passers-by. The small donation we give as we walk by is, in this situation, usually just a drop in the bucket. Another major problem is the plight of migrants who came to the U.S. in hopes of a better life, but are now stuck without work permits and without access to social services. Many of them are faced with a system that offers them neither prospects nor security. In cities like Chicago or Denver, people who have only recently immigrated now make up a significant portion of the homeless population. Their stories may differ, but their situations often become strikingly similar all too quickly. Since the legal job market remains closed to them, they inevitably end up in illegal work or resort to begging. This fuels social tensions and provides fuel for political debates, while the people affected literally freeze to death on the sidewalks in winter. The fact that in one of the richest nations in the world, in the 21st century, hundreds of people still die from the cold should really be a wake-up call for society as a whole. It is certainly not always easy to show solidarity with people who made a wrong decision at some crossroads in their lives, but contempt for those who have fallen helps no one. So should we give the $2 or not? The answer is that, given the monumental structural problems, this small donation is almost secondary. It would be far more important to radically address the root causes, such as the lack of affordable housing and skyrocketing healthcare costs. There is currently a shortage of millions of affordable housing units in the U.S., while at the same time the number of luxury apartments in downtown areas continues to grow. Perhaps the best response to a person begging isn't to ignore them or simply toss a coin, but to take a moment for a genuine human connection. Change rarely begins on a grand scale, but often in small moments of awareness. Instead of just wondering what they'll do with the money, one could try to find out why they're in this situation in the first place. A simple conversation can often have a greater impact than a few cents, as it restores the person's sense of being seen as a human being. At the end of the day, it is the fates of individuals that lie behind the alarming statistics. We've reached the end of today's deep dive, and the question remains, how do you personally handle it when you encounter homeless people in your city? Do you feel that the situation has gotten worse in recent years, or do you see signs that give you hope? Share your thoughts and arguments in the comments below. I'm really looking forward to this discussion. If this video has given you something to think about, please consider subscribing and giving a like so I can continue to shed light on such important topics in the future. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Take care.